Hi, everyone. This is Ali John Chaudhry, psychotherapist, and we are here today with Fern. And today's episode in Brothers, Sisters, Strangers is going to be all about narcissistic parents and sibling estrangement. And we are so ready to do an episode about this because it is an issue that's been arising for a number of our viewers and participants in the Zoom group, but also in our Facebook group as well. So basically, we're going to be going into how does a narcissistic parent look, what does it do to you, and as well, we'll be looking at what you can do to protect yourself. So basically, that's going to be today's episode. And Fern, I know that you wanted to start us off with a story. So
thank you. I'm glad to be with you as always. And I wanted to add to your introduction that we always bring it back to how this affects sibling relationships. So narcissistic parents and sibling relationships. I actually have very intimate experiences with a narcissistic parent. My father was an extraordinarily accomplished scientist and professor, and a story I thought revealed so much about him and his students occurred at a holiday party many, many years ago. And one of his students came up to me and said, "Do you know what it's like to be his student? Do you know how critical and harsh he is and how difficult he is to get along with?" And I'm listening, and this young man was going on and on about the challenges of being my father's student. And I finally just broke in and said, "Do you know what it's like to be his daughter?" And that stopped him because whatever he was experiencing in the professor-student relationship, I was experiencing on steroids as his daughter.
wow. Yeah, that's quite something, though.
Very harsh, very critical, very much expected his children to reflect upon him and continue in his career or his glory. And these are, I have learned, characteristics of narcissistic parents.
Absolutely. And it's very insidious in how it can sometimes work. And you're right. I think that that's the thing too. We're left with an especially overwhelming feeling that comes up when we deal with people that are like that. And when you have somebody like that, that's a caregiver, that should be a caregiver in your parental unit, it's quite an experience with regards to what it does to us. And that's what we're really going to get into today, because I think that a lot of us need to kind of watch out for these signs and recognize just what that is, and I know that the conversation is being had more and more now on narcissism, and I think this is especially important to look at how this can affect some of us.
I think it's important too to say that when you're raised in this, you don't recognize that this is abnormal in any way. You believe that this is how families operate. And the problem with that is it takes a long time to have what I call an awakening to the fact that you are living in a toxic narcissistic environment. And many of us don't figure it out for decades.
You're absolutely right. And that's why it's so important for us to have this conversation. And I would agree with you. I think that because you're born into the family, you don't know. I mean, you're like a blank page, it's like you're taking it in, and you don't find out about what this is until you start to see other families and you start to realize it's not like that with other people, So basically, let's look at some of the things that come up with some of us as we are going through in some family units, So basically, a narcissistic parent is usually irrationally accusatory towards you, because they expect you first and foremost to satisfy their needs, right? And that's one of the things that happens oftentimes, because children end up, being raised, and sooner or later start to sense that they have to take care of their distraught parent, and this is where the role reversal all of a sudden starts to happen, where you're the one suddenly being the parent as a child, and the parent's the child. So it's really something when you start to kind of experience that and start to all of a sudden have to take care of your parent at a very young age. And that's one of the things that's hardest for people.
And to some extent, narcissistic parents are very arrested at a young age. So it makes sense that they can't take care of you because they need someone to take care of them.
Exactly, exactly, and that is something that we notice as well as we move along with regards to that. It's the notion that they have a certain emotional immaturity to them, because the thing with that is that, say, you have a sibling, and oftentimes there may be like different conflicts coming up as with rivalry and such, which is completely normal. But what they'll do oftentimes is that they'll almost feed the rivalry in some ways if it gives them an advantage of some sort. So they can make fun of anybody showing vulnerability, trying to manage a conflict. They'll just basically downplay it and basically just never transmit that sense of emotional intelligence that we need to have. So I hear this from people when they're adults all of a sudden, it's like they have to figure it out by themselves in terms of how to understand feelings, because oftentimes narcissistic parents will pin one child against the other and really poison the relationship between siblings.
And there's no condition, it's all conditional love. There's no unconditional love. And as a result, you're constantly jumping through their hoops in order to get some acknowledgement or some feeling that you matter.
Exactly. It's a very conditional love. You're absolutely right. I think that's the thing. It's you're always having to jump through these hoops. It's a very good analogy, I think. And because if you don't do what they want, they'll basically criticize you, even withhold their love, in that way, make it very conditional. If you don't do this, well, I'm just not going to care about you. And that's basically not necessarily said out loud, but it's very much felt.
Yeah, you feel like you're in their doghouse.
Yeah, exactly. And you're suddenly subject to their whims, to their mood and such, and it's their standards are usually unrealistically high, and if you don't measure up for some odd reason, you're met with scorn, ridicule, anger a lot of times. So it can be very disorienting for a child or somebody raised by a narcissistic parent to try to figure all this out. What am I supposed to do? So. Mm-hmm.
And it also sets up very difficult sibling relationships because the children are pitted against each other. They're competing for limited affection. And, you can't really find love with a sibling in that kind of environment.
Well, that's the thing that happens, right? It's either you team up together and you become really good allies amidst what's going on, or what ends up happening in some cases is that basically it pulls people apart, and the parents narcissistically will feed this conflict because they're not emotionally mature enough to be able to give to the child what's needed. So they'll always perpetually create conflict if it means that it can triangulate against one child that's not doing the right thing according to the narcissist. So,
and triangulation is a huge piece of this.
Yeah,
they constantly play one against the other, and if they have issues with you, they don't tell you directly, they tell your sibling, and of course you will eventually hear it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that's the difficult part, and that can carry on into adulthood. And this is what makes it particularly hard, especially if they play these type of games that tend to happen oftentimes. So basically, you also have different ways that narcissistic parents can show themselves and show their colors, right? There's victimization, right? They can make themselves basically just feel bad and have people suddenly give them more nurturing, more attention, and feel sorry for them. That does happen with some narcissists. Well, they'll basically play the victim card, so that way people will go to them. So any attention they can have is good. So if you're the child and you've gotten into the caretaker or fixer role, all of a sudden you're having to take care of that parent when they play the victim. You're not old enough to understand that this is some sort of psychological game that's going on, that's playing itself out. So,
well, and the tactic I'm most familiar with is narcissistic rage. So when they don't get their way, they rage.
yeah.
And, everyone is walking on eggshells because they're afraid of that temper.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. You're not sure when it's going to get set off. You know, and that's a very good example of walking on eggshells and such. You know, it's the idea that you're not sure what to say, what to do. You're thinking somehow there's a pattern of some sort, and there really isn't. You know, that's the thing that happens. Anything is good for the narcissist to use as material to get set off. And conversations can generally remain unfulfilled. They're usually one-sided. They'll usually shift things towards themselves. And this is the thing that I find especially disheartening, is the idea that they feel as if children can't have more success than them. And they'll always want to make themselves look superior, and make the child miss out on an opportunity for learning if it means that it boosts their own ego. So.
That's a really frightening approach to parenting.
It is. It is. And on the other side, you know, you have people that are sometimes involved in a good cause as well, because it's self-serving. It validates them, right? If they're involved in different things going on around the community and such, then yeah, it makes them feel good to be that, you know. But in the end, when the doors are closed and you're faced with them, it's a whole different story.
Well, there are so many different kinds of narcissists, and we've touched upon this in other episodes. There's the communal narcissist, and the covert, and the malignant narcissist, and even the conversational narcissist. And that's that person who talks excessively and controls all the airwaves. Yeah. So, you know, I think that we tend to quickly dismiss the idea that somebody's a narcissist because they don't fit into the one way in which we perceive what a narcissist, how a narcissist behaves. But in fact, there are lots of ways to be a narcissist.
Absolutely. And it's very important to recognize all these types of different games that come up. And I think it's important to flash forward also and see what this does to us as adults. I think that's we're getting into part 2 here in terms of what it does to you. And I think that that's an important question to look at, because, you know, it has a serious self-effect on our self-image and on our overall mental health. If you've taken the time to take a back seat, for example, in your family relationship, and you felt as if there was triangulation going on in terms of preferring the golden child, you know, or basically just recognizing that the parents are always taking care of their own exclusive needs more so than those of the children, then this can cause you basically just to inhibit your desires, your ambitions, your general inclinations and preferences. And this carries over into adult life. Because if you're erasing yourself just to maintain the peace, or just to basically allow for the other person to take up more room than your own personality, then there's a danger that basically you'll make these choices, say in romantic relationships, you know, elsewhere, with regards to just even maintaining that particular identity when you meet with family and such.
Right. You have a good chance, unless you get therapy, to reenact that pattern of behavior in your adult life, in a partnership or marriage. The other piece that I want to say here, and I know we're going to do something in the future on enabling, but this is a great setup for young people, the children in the family, to become enablers, because they have such a desperate need to belong and to please. And what they often do is accommodate the narcissist and forfeit themselves. And that's where that enabling pattern starts. And if it continues into adulthood, it generally leads to a rather unsatisfying life.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I think that's very important. The failure to thrive in some cases that some people have called, right? And, you know, I think that that's really important to recognize that, because I think that's something that carries over into adult life in different ways. And in some ways, I think that kind of shows us just to what extent sometimes the inner critic can start to appear inside of ourselves with regards to that. Because when the inner critic starts to appear, then it's okay to have our own form of inner critic. There's healthy criticism, but there's demeasured, exaggerated criticism. And oftentimes we internalize our parents as we grow up. So we know, and I have clients that basically do this in my office. Basically, they theatrically do improv with regards to their parent. They can match them to a T. It's like I'm watching like a different person sometimes. And it's just quite something when you see this, because with the inner critic that becomes so strong and deregulated, then basically it can cause us to just be silent and basically just avoid or diminish our natural capacity towards curiosity and self-discovery. So yeah, so I think that's important to recognize.
I think what we're really getting into is almost the neglected child, because rather than having a parent who mirrors you and says, oh, I see you're so good at getting along with others, or I see who you are in some way. There is none of that, because the only person who can be seen is the narcissist. So
Exactly.
if you as a child are not mirrored, you never really learn to see who you are, because of course we don't have those skills as children. We need others to help us see ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. If you don't have a healthy role model, then you're internalizing the standards of somebody that's unhealthy, right? So you can end up doubting yourself, second guessing yourself when you're taught that your needs are not important. You may choose not to speak up when it's important to speak up. And again, if you have a sibling that, basically buys into this, with the identity that they're given as a golden child potentially in the relationship, then, they can adopt the criticism of you because you become the black sheep in the family and such. So you're seen as the bad person, quote unquote, and they can basically just keep on criticizing you. So I think that that's one thing that's potential as a result to watch out for, and especially when we see if we have a sibling that basically is the golden child, how do they treat us? Do they talk down to us if we have a narcissistic parent?
Well, and of course, that golden child had the narcissistic model as the parent. So the likelihood is that they may become narcissistic themselves. And my theory is that so many of these estrangements that we see and hear about are rooted in a narcissistic sibling.
Yeah, I think narcissism plays a big part in a lot of this. And of course, there's different factors, but narcissism is a big one. Bad chemistry between the two when you come together, things of that nature. Just the idea of an unhealthy competition, which is narcissistic as well. But there's different factors at play, I think, with regards to that. People's insecurities can come into the relationship and projections of those insecurities and all that type of stuff. So there's a variety of different reasons why this happens, I think, in families, but narcissism does play a big role into it. And if you're told all your life that your feelings and emotions don't matter, then, for some people, this can actually cause them to pull the plug, as a matter of fact, with regards to feeling things altogether. And if you're not feeling things, because you're protecting yourself by fear of being hurt, then, you become potentially an emotionally unavailable person. And that can hinder you or prevent you from achieving depth in a normal, healthy relationship. And a lot of times people have different unhealthy coping mechanisms because of that when they unplug and they're emotionally unavailable. Some of them can be workaholism. People will throw themselves excessively into work or get very busy with something. Substance abuse or other excesses in behaviors, video games maybe, whatever it can be that causes a withdrawal from social activities is something to watch out for.
Yeah, my brain was going in so many different directions as you were talking. I forgot what I wanted to say.
I know,
But,
right? There's so much. I know.
oh, I know what I wanted to say. I wanted to say pull the plug, and sometimes pull the plug on that very relationship because it's simply too toxic to sustain. And we're seeing a lot of that discussion on your Facebook page that, is it necessary to walk away when you're constantly being injured? And of course, the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's important, especially if you're starting to experience adversity or just even overall negative mental health symptoms like depression or anxiety and things of that nature, and you're busy fending off attacks by parental figures or your sibling and such. It's important that you reach out and get some help. And some of the help can be had with regards to the Facebook page, Sibling Estrangement, Sharing, Coping, Connecting, which I've created and such. And of course, there's the Facebook, or not Facebook, but the Zoom support group online that we host as well. I think it's very important that we keep on offering these resources, because sibling estrangement keeps on being an issue that is not as widely talked about as we'd like to, but the conversation is happening thanks to us and thanks to others also that are coming up. And I do think, I just want to say, I think with mental health issues, it's important to recognize if you're starting to have anxiety or depression, I'll also recognize that that might be one of the consequences of the what you've experienced in your family, but not necessarily the root cause. You know, it could be a reaction to the narcissistic parent, especially. So something to keep in mind.
I know we're almost out of time, and I want to remind our viewers to hit the bell so that they know when we do another episode, and subscribe to our channel, because we have a growing community and it's getting livelier all the time as we get more and more comments.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I think that's important, especially in, we'll take these last few minutes just to talk about how to protect ourselves. I think that's really, really important as well. And yes, please do subscribe to our YouTube video. That's very important that you can subscribe to our channel, or join our Facebook group, Sibling Estrangement Sharing, Coping, Connecting. Very important to build community and have a place where you can experience belonging in a healthy way. So what can you do to protect yourself? I think the single most important thing is to set boundaries with narcissistic parents or a sibling as well. I think by the time you're an adult, you no longer have to deal with the type of stuff that you have to deal with when you're growing up in a family and you're being raised and such, you know. And people sometimes ask me, well, where should I start? How do I establish boundaries? Well, there's physical, psychological, verbal boundaries, of course, but a good way to start is to ask ourselves which buttons get pushed inside of us, right? Which situation arises in which we feel demeaned, bullied, or minimized, especially, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's very hard to set boundaries with a narcissistic parent, short of walking away, because their patterns are so fixed.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, I was just thinking of a client that consulted with me where parents the father figure would invite them for a night by the campfire. And basically, you know, they'd be invited and they'd go over, and the father would take the time to tell each person that was there what was wrong with them. So you can imagine what that does. You feel you're first of all, you're shocked, you're dismayed, and then you feel depleted. And they would get very angry and share their anger with me, like, why is this happening? Why is he treating me this way? And eventually, you know, as we did the work together, they recognized that the event was toxic for them and enabling the narcissistic parent. And eventually they stopped going. So that's an example of a boundary that people can set. If there's family events where you're promised that it'll go well, it's going to be positive, look forward to seeing you, but it turns out to be something else, then that's an example of something maybe to limit in your life if that's happening, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah.
There's always geographic estrangement or boundary setting. In other words, you move far away.
Yeah, there's that too, right? So whenever the inner critic rears its ugly head, it can stop us from taking healthy risks. It can sow doubts, inhibit us and such. And, you know, this pattern can be perpetuated generationally as well if we're not careful, right? So a good way to work with this is to actually have another voice inside of us that can counter the inner critic, you know? We've talked about the protector, but there's also the voice of the cheerleader, which I like especially as well. Now, what would the cheerleader say about your job application, about that project you've been thinking about doing, about that place you've been wanting to visit? And this is something that's really, really good too, is to start an activity that actually you get better at, that there's a progression that you can start to notice. So when you're doing like music, drawing, cooking, woodworking, etc., whatever activity, you know, suits you, if you see that you get better at it, what that does is it makes you feel good, but it gives you a sense of self-worth, which is very important here, especially.
Yeah, I just want to say, having gone through some of this, it is a very tough, difficult challenge to rise above this. And it can be done. And you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past. The result, if you are successful, is that you do have what's called post-traumatic growth, where you actually begin to reflect on how this experience defined you and how it also made you stronger and created things you like about yourself.
Exactly. The greatest people that inspire us are usually people that have gone through some hardships. You know, I'm thinking of Maya Angelou here, who's a great poet, but if you read her biography, she's been through a lot, you know. So there's it's important to consider that we can use this as a learning experience for us in terms of how we want to live and what we need for ourselves. And something that's really important is to learn how to feel again, you know, because if we become emotionally inhibited and such, it becomes really important to learn how to do that. And it's a good way to do that is to acknowledge some of the feelings that are going on through an exercise that's called focusing, which allows you to dive deeper into yourself. So there are different focusing exercises that enable people to chart the territory, so to speak, map the territory inside of themselves. And I think that that's an important skill to help you to approach feelings and emotions on your own terms. So that can be very important to do that in a healthy way.
I think too, one of the best ways to heal from this is to find yourself in a nurturing, loving partnership.
Absolutely.
That can, more than almost anything else, help you to rise above this.
Absolutely. I think a nurturing relationship is healthy because it gives you what you needed. It fills those gaps. And when we experience that, we know it feels good to us. So we know to have more of that. And that is very nourishing. And so very important to do that. And also feel free to reach out to a therapist if you need to. You know, I know it's as a psychotherapist, I know that there's some people that are more aware of estrangement issues, but sibling estrangement is something that is in particular of itself. So I do encourage people to reach out and to recognize if they need help. They can certainly find people that can help them with regards to this. So I know that we're probably approaching the end of our session here already, Fern. I know we had a lot to say today. Our video is a little bit longer today, but you know what? I'm very happy with it because this is such important information. It needs to come out. And I do encourage people, of course, to do what's best and empower themselves in this whole process. So,
well, it's always great to talk, always great to be with you. And I know we're going to talk more about enablers in the future. So I'll look forward to that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for doing this again, Fern. I hope we'll have a chance to continue this. And again, to our viewers, please subscribe to our channel if you like these videos. If they speak to you and they empower you, please do so. Videos are under Ali John Chaudhry on YouTube. And do consider, of course, the Facebook group that we have that's private. Sibling Estrangement, Sharing, Coping, Connecting. It's a thriving community. You have people that understand just what you're going through. And I think that'll be very important. And of course, there is the online support group on Zoom that we host also once a month. And yeah, I think that'll be a good resource if you want to talk with people in real time. So please go ahead and take a look at that and get in touch with me if you'd like to participate in that group.
You will find you are not alone. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much, Fern, for doing this. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.